Hey everyone, this video contains 5 different kinds of stories. A crazy ex story, a drug story, a night shift story, a taxi story, and a camping story. If you can comment by the end of the video which kind of story you'd like to have an entire video dedicated to so I know what you guys want to see, that would help a ton. I've also left timestamps in the description for each story, so if you've heard a story before and you want to skip it, you're able to. Now, on to the stories. I think this story will be improved by some context about the setting and such, so here we go. First, this took place after I graduated high school and moved away from my family. I moved up to Alaska again, and I say again because I lived there before and attended college there. Second, and very conveniently, my mother had been renting out our old house instead of selling it. I say conveniently because the long-standing residents had moved away and therefore I was awarded the old house. I had to work quite a bit to keep up the payments, but my mother pitched in, thankfully. Third, at the beginning of this story, I should make you aware that I had recently broken up with a girl who had been staying with me in the old house I was renting through my mother. And this breakup was unclean and dysfunctional, much like the relationship itself was. And finally, the story begins. It was winter break, which means I would be spending more time inside than I normally would. It was somewhat lonely in the house, being without a stable girlfriend then. Also, there's no neighbors really to speak of, as the house was in an extremely wooded region a few miles out of town. One late afternoon, soon after I thought the whole breakup predicament had come to a close, I was made quite aware that it wasn't. My cell phone began ringing and ringing from an unknown number. Cliché, I know, and I decided to pick up. It was, of course, my ex. She began telling me about how great her new boyfriend is and how horrible I was and am. The sort of talk that you can almost smell the booze off the caller's breath from miles away. I was actually listening until she decided to hand the phone over to her boyfriend, where he was instead sounding oddly threatening, and I decided to hang up in the most polite manner possible, with a "fuck you and have a nice day." Days later, again with my mind beginning to forget, only this time about the most certainly drunken phone call, I'm laying on the living room couch watching some TV. While laying there, I noticed something quite unsettling. A person standing in the window behind me. How did I notice this, you ask? The reflection from the TV screen is how. I didn't move, not an inch. I had no gun, I had no knife, I had nothing but my wit and my fists. I just lay there, watching the reflection. Eventually, it moved away from the window. That normally wouldn't spook me, but I was taking into account that 1. The house was nowhere near another, so that's a red flag. 2. If someone was just wanting to talk, they'd knock. And 3. I was most certain that it was that boyfriend of hers. Nothing became of that situation, but similar situations continued, such as a car pulling into the driveway and no one getting out and leaving inconspicuously. This was worrisome at the least, but I didn't suspect a true threat. A few days later, I'm laying in bed at night. It was very late and I was getting ready to sleep. I get another call from an unknown number. It's her, but this time she's asking me to come outside and come see her because she wants to deliver an apology. At the time I was thinking, oh, how do I say this? Fuck off. Though I still went outside to see what the deal was. I open the door and of course it's incredibly dark. I say into the phone, "Hey, I'm outside."
Come around back.
With this, I began to walk on the snow-covered ground in the darkness with just my put-on boots. The motion lights turn on as I cross the garage and the driveway. The snow masking the ground is tinted yellow by the light. I round the corner of the garage and turn my phone to see. There's a road that runs behind my house and connects to the driveway by bending, and I make my way towards the road. The snow crunches beneath my boots as I come even closer. There's a part in the trees that allows me to walk straight to the road, otherwise one would have to make his way around the entirety of the driveway, and I reach this part. I ask into the phone, "Where are you?"
In the car. I see you.
I step onto the road and see her car parked a few dozen feet away from me with the lights dimmed. "So, what's the deal?"
I just want to talk. Come here.
I approach the car and make my way around to the passenger side, and I finally see her face. She waves me in and I go ahead and oblige, sitting down in the car. I look at her and she says,
Look, I'm sorry. I know I've been a real bitch lately.
No, it's okay. I really wasn't good to you and I deserve it.
I don't agree, but...
Then, of course, she abruptly stops speaking because car lights shine from behind us. Naturally, I assume it's her boyfriend, and by the look on her face, she did too. The car parks behind us, and sure enough, the boyfriend gets out and storms over to my side of the car. He yanks on the door handle and the door swings open and he attempts to grab me, but I grabbed his wrist and got out of the car. What the fuck do you think you're doing with her, huh? We were talking and I was about to leave. Bullshit, you're trying to fucking bang her. Look, I'm trying to sleep and I'm in no mood to do anything. He gave me this look of utter enragement before swinging at me and, of course, missing. A little scuffle ensued and all that happened was him swearing and eventually slipping and falling before yelling at us both that he was going to fucking kill me and blah blah blah. I just stood by her car as he pulled away. She gave me a lift back to the house and I invited her in and she obliged. It was late in the night and I suggested she lock her car if she was going to stay the night and she, again, obliged. We slept upstairs in my bed before I awoke hours later. There was a banging at the back door and I knew this because the back door was directly below my room. She woke up too, whispering, "Oh my God," to herself. I stand up quietly and go to my closet and reach behind the coats that I'll never wear and grab my Louisville Slugger. She was sitting upright in my bed with her hand seemingly embarrassingly covering her eyes. I didn't say anything before walking down the stairs slowly, attempting to be silent. The lights were off and there's no windows on the staircase. The banging on the back door had audibly ceased. I held the bat tightly, making sure it didn't bang into the wall to signal my position at the time. I remember how slowly I stepped down, especially on the bottom 3 steps, which were always the creakiest. Once I reached the last step, I froze, and it still gives me chills to this day. The hardwood floors creak around the bottom of the staircase, and there was a creaking that was growing closer and closer. I raised the bat above my head, ready to slam whoever it was right on top of the head. The creaking grew closer until I could hear it from my side, and I planned to swing it as soon as it was right in front of me. As the staircase opened to the left from the bottom up, I listened very carefully, holding my breath. The creaking came to my northeast and I squeezed my hands tighter than I ever had before around the bat, waiting for it to become just north of me. The floor creaked again. This time they were directly in front of me and I slammed the bat down hard. I hit something hard and whatever it was crumpled to the floor with a bang and a small flash. I turned on the light and there he was, the boyfriend. He had shot his gun directly at the floor and left a hole in the hardwood. My ex came down the stairs and was crying profusely, muttering, "I'm so sorry," over and over again. I called the local police station and 4 cop cars pulled into my driveway along with an ambulance in a matter of minutes. I sat there at the base of the stairs, watching the boyfriend. He was breathing. I could tell from his chest slowly inclining and declining off the floor. I had grabbed what I think was a 9mm off the floor and kept it in my hand with the safety turned on, and I just shook my head over and over in utter disbelief. I explained the situation to police as the paramedics rushed in and carried him out on a stretcher. All in all, I didn't get to sleep until the afternoon later that day after all things had been finished. He ended up actually being induced into a coma and eventually recovered, but a restraining order had already been filed in advance. My ex and I became good friends after the incident and she never dated that guy again. I never ended up moving, though I had considered it heavily, and nothing has since happened. And there you have it. That's my story. This just happened to me a few nights ago and I'm still shaken up, so bear with me. I'm a female bartender at a small cafe that doubles as a venue. During the day, we serve coffee and lunch, and at night we have a full bar with bands, comedy shows, etc. On this night, there was an open mic comedy show. Not a lot of comedians showed up, so we ended up closing up shop early and I was ready to go home. I had a patron come in and order a single beer during the comedy show. He was acting nervous, but being a female bartender, I get male customers that are shy or don't want to talk to women, so I didn't think much about it. He sat down, sipped his beer, and watched the show. Since we closed early, everyone was pretty much gone and I wanted to lock up and clean so I could get home. After I escorted the last couple out of the bar and got ready to lock the door, I see the man from earlier walk down the back hallway and into the men's restroom. Not even a minute later, he burst through the door yelling, "Hurry, come back here, I need help." I stood on the opposite end of the hallway and asked him what was wrong. "The toilet is overflowing, there's water all over the floor, help me clean this up." I could tell that something was wrong and I replied, "It's okay, man, it happens, I'll mop it up. I'm just trying to close up right now." He continued to argue with me, trying to get me to come into the bathroom with him as I stood about 20 feet away down the hallway. Finally, he walks towards me very aggressively and tries to grab my arm. "You need to come back here now," he says. I immediately put my hands out in front of me so he can't come any closer and tell him he needs to leave. He walks outside and I lock the door behind him. I check the bathroom and it is completely spotless. No water on the floor at all. I flush the toilet and urinal and they're both working fine. I start to get nervous and I take my large pocket knife and clip it to my waistband of my pants, just in case. As I'm cleaning our espresso machine and putting toppers on the liquor bottles, I hear a tapping noise. I look up at the front of the store, which is one big window that has a few curtains covering it. The same man is tapping on the window, waving at me and laughing like a maniac. I watch him walk over to the door and pull on it. It doesn't open since I had locked it after he left. He starts screaming and pounding on the glass saying, "Open the fucking door! I'm going to fucking kill you." Fight overcame flight at this point and I walked around the counter and about 6 feet from the door. I pulled out my knife and locked eyes with him and yelled, "I'm calling the cops, get the fuck out of here." He smiled and walked out of view of the window. At this point, all of my adrenaline just crashed. I locked myself in the office and called 911 crying, explaining that I'm alone and a man tried to lure me into the bathroom and was outside trying to get into my bar. I waited an hour and a half and no police showed up. I called my boyfriend and he drove up to the shop. My manager watched the security cameras from home, making sure that the man didn't come back. I did the deposit and immediately drove home, my boyfriend following close behind me. My male busboy has been coming into work with me so I'm not alone, and the managers have been keeping an eye on the security cameras while I'm working. Have you ever done something so incredibly stupid that it wrecks everything good in your life? This is what happened to me 3.5 years ago. Let me start by saying that I grew up with very little supervision in a shitty household. I'm a male and my 2 sisters and I were basically left to fend for ourselves in an empty house more than half of the time. Needless to say, we grew up quick. I was a junior in high school at the time and despite my upbringing, I was relatively well behaved. The worst thing I did was smoke weed, which in today's society isn't that bad. I was out late one night with 3 of my friends. They were all a few years older and 2 of the 3 were dropouts. They weren't my best friends or anything, and honestly, I didn't even really like hanging out with them, but hey, I was an outcast, so I did what I had to do to fit in somewhere. Trip, the most defiant of the group, was a known drug dealer. He was lanky as hell and covered in shitty tattoos. He mostly sold weed, but every once in a while would get his hands on the hard stuff. This particular night, he boasted about a bag of what he said to be coke. It was a pretty small amount, but the quality looked decent. I mean, I knew very little about the shit, but it was so white it was nearly glowing. I was already the kid of the group, which they commonly referred to me as, so it was obvious that I was a little timid just being around such a high caliber drug. I tried to act casual, examining the bag like I was comfortable and familiar with it. It obviously didn't work well because they all started joking and taking smart-ass jabs at me, just being dicks. Eventually, the conversation switched over to Tripp wondering whether or not I would like taking it, and how I might react to it. Stupidly trying to act hard, I told him that I would handle it with ease and probably even need more than what he had.
"Oh, really? Well, here, on the house."
He said this while pouring out half the bag on the park table where we were sitting, and began separating it with a Wendy's rewards card. I guess I remember the Wendy's card because of how significant and terrifying that moment was for me, seeing as after all of my tough talk I would have to take the hit. He rolled up a $5 bill and handed it to me while explaining how to do it. I was dangerously close to bailing out but couldn't bring myself to do it. This was my chance to look like one of them. I had to do it. Looking back, I legitimately hate myself for being so stupid. Long story short, it wasn't coke. It was some street knockoff shit that was laced to the max. I don't remember much shortly after I took the hit, but the story goes that while walking home, I stripped butt-ass naked and was screaming at the top of my lungs. I had the cops called on me, and I apparently resisted them when they approached me. I swear to God that I don't remember 1 second of this. I woke up in a holding cell and was charged with resisting arrest on top of the other more major charges. I was a minor at the time but was charged as an adult, something to do with the way the court dates extended past my 18th birthday. I didn't receive any support from my parents or my friends that gave me the drug, whatever the fuck it was. I'm still on probation to this day and struggle with a felony attached to my name. Please, for whoever is listening to this, do as they taught you in grade school and just say no to drugs. Seriously. I'm a female and I grew up in a small remote town. We had no public transport except a random bus that showed up once a week to take you in or out of town. I first left home at 17 and moved to a large town. When working, I often finished work between 12 to 4 in the morning. If I didn't feel like walking or couldn't get a ride home, I would call a taxi on several occasions. I encountered drivers that would purposely drive me to the wrong places despite their navman in my directions, I'm assuming for extra cash. Or on one occasion when I had two $50 notes stuck together and the cab driver tried to take both, telling me I gave him one. At that time, I lived with a housemate who was hardly home, which meant me, at 17, basically had an entire house to myself. Despite some incidents with taxi drivers, I wasn't aware of how damn right creepy some of them are. I'm in my 20s now, and people I've encountered tell me how some taxi drivers tried to molest them in the cab, rob them, kidnap them, etc. With my story, it was about 1 or 2 a.m. in the morning. I caught a cab and the driver was asking me fairly basic questions like most do, such as what do you do for a living, are you local, stuff like that. The chat eventually changed to about where I was living. I made a comment that out of like 3 weeks of the month I get the house to myself, to which the driver replied with, "You probably shouldn't tell people that." Somehow the air felt like it was sucked out and I stopped talking to him. He did continue trying to get me talking. After I paid, he sat in the taxi with the lights on in the driveway. I originally thought he was turning around, but he was there for ages. I heard a car door open and close when I was upstairs, yet ignored it until I heard the neighbor's dog start barking. The dog lived in the backyard of the neighbor's house. However, whenever someone went through our side gate to our backyard, it would start barking. I freaked out and immediately turned out all the lights in the house. I also grabbed my bedside weapon, then listened because I knew someone was in our backyard. I could hear someone trying all the downstairs doors and windows. I started calling the police. When I called the police, I was whispering into the line and ended up talking to the bitchiest woman on earth who talked to me like I was trash. Also, no matter how many times I repeated the situation, she was just like, "So, a taxi driver is at your house. Did you order a cab?" I eventually heard a car door close and the taxi left. After telling Bitchface this, she told me she'll get me fined if I prank called them again. The next day, I found large shoe print tracks all around the house, like someone had walked around it several times. I am 100% sure the taxi driver was trying to break in, and I don't think it was for a robbery. This happened just over 2 years ago, and it has seriously made me rethink camping alone. I was with 2 friends this time, and I worry about what would have happened if I was by myself. 2 friends and myself were on a cross-country trip, and Roswell, New Mexico was one of our stops. We were there for the kitsch, but we were also camping for most of the trip, so we got a site at the Bottomless Lake State Park, about 20 minutes outside of the city. We did our thing in town for the day and headed back to our site around sundown. Everything seemed pretty standard at first. There were some neighbors camping down the road and we could hear their music. The Moldy Peaches, a pretty light-hearted soundtrack which didn't set the creepiest of tones. My 2 friends, who were a couple, read and wrote in their journals by lantern light, and I drank a couple beers while taking long exposure photographs of our campsites. The music eventually died down, my friends got tired and went to sleep, and after I got the shot I wanted, I did too. I awoke fairly disoriented, somewhere in that state of transition from light to deep sleep. I heard crunching around my tent. Not knowing if I was dreaming or not, I just kind of sat up in my tent to figure out if what I was hearing was real or just remnants of sleep. I started to hear it again, and this time it was closer. This sound wasn't just closer, it was directly outside of my tent. Understandably, the hair on the back of my neck was straight up and I knew something was wrong. There was a moment that I thought that it could have been a ranger. Who knows, maybe our registration was messed up or maybe we left the headlights on for the car. I asked out loud, "If someone is out there, can you please make your presence known?" Nothing. "Hello? Please identify yourself." Nothing. I sat there, frozen, with one of the most intense sense of fright I've ever felt, and it was dead silent. I calmed myself to lay back down, hoping I'd been imagining it, and closed my eyes. From what I could tell, within the next 5 minutes, the footsteps started moving around my tent. I shot back up and fucking knew someone was out there. At this moment, something so surreal happened that I can't quite adequately express my sense of fright. As I sat there, open-mouthed and silent, the end of my tent started to be lifted up by the person outside. I screamed for my friends in their tent, screamed for them to wake up and that someone was outside. It felt really hectic. My friends were disoriented, I was disoriented, and from then on, I didn't hear or see anyone else. My friend was basically yelling at me to stick my head out of my tent and check it out. But I was absolutely terrified that if I did, I'd get my head lopped off or I'd have a gun stuck in my face. I finally worked up the balls and saw nothing. No one. We got out of the tents and into the car and I told them everything. They seemed concerned, yet skeptical. I was adamant that something had happened. We decided to shine our headlamps from the car in the direction of our tents, which was kind of surrounded by these rocky hills and a dried up riverbed. As we scanned the rocks with our lights, another light hits the rocks behind our tents. We decided that it would probably be a good idea to leave our shit and get a motel room, so we headed to Roswell at about midnight. The whole night, I just kind of felt stupid. I was also really scared. I kept trying to tell myself that I was just dreaming or that it was a raccoon or that I'd seen too many horror movies. We kinda joked about it, watched Cops on the shitty motel TV, and fell asleep. When we went back in the morning, my fears were unfortunately confirmed. We rolled up and nothing seemed to be out of place, nothing stolen or moved, or so we thought. We start picking up our things and I begin to take my tarp off. My friend says out loud, "Wow, that's really fucking weird," and signals me over. The elastic and bungee cords that hold the rainfly on his tent were cut, clean through like with scissors or a knife. The tent was brand new. I went back over to my tent to see if I had the same and was immediately drawn to the fresh boot prints that circled my tent, footprints that were on top of mine. That said, we packed up and we did it fast. We almost didn't even really talk about it. I actually even think that my friend who got his tent cut open is still a bit skeptical. I can't say for certain who this person was or what they were trying to do, but they certainly achieved scaring the living shit out of me. I hope I never see this tent stalker or whoever it was again.